Hi YouTubers, it's been also something important, so it's been methods right now. So today's methods are big ass cigar talk about right now. Basically, vaccine reactions mild to severe. So obviously I'm not a doctor for the last damn time, so that shit is very important because I'm not a doctor for the last damn time. So a freaking doctor. Now we're talking about basically right now vaccines like the COVID vaccine, the chickenpox vaccine, the HPV vaccine, all kinds of vaccines, the hepatitis A vaccine, and basically how you can have a reaction that can be very mild to severe. Now, having said that, when you get a vaccine, which is a shot, with a needle and basically goes into your arm, generally, you can have anywhere from a very mild reaction to a very severe reaction. And there's really no way of knowing because everyone's body reacts differently to vaccines. I mean, for a better word, there's no fucking way of knowing. Because, I mean, for example, most people who get a vaccine, and most vaccines, with the exception of a few, have gone through, numerous trials. They've been tested before, and they're not just like, going to release them without any testing. So most vaccines have a pretty reputable, reputable shit. So as in bullshit is bullshit, So it's not like they're just randomly injecting crap into you or shit into you. They have done a lot of testing. They've tested this before on this kind of shit. That kind of shit. So know that most vaccines, especially the older vaccines, are thought to be very, very safe. So, like the MMR vaccine is thought to be very safe. The chickenpox vaccine, which came out in the 90s, or was that the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, that's thought to be perfectly safe. The polio vaccine, perfectly safe. Smallpox vaccine, perfectly safe. Tuberculosis vaccine, whooping cough vaccine, perfectly safe. And just because you get the shot doesn't necessarily mean you can't get, the virus later on. You can get what's called a breakthrough case, like with coronavirus. You can get basically a breakthrough case, but the vaccine basically, protects you like the flu vaccine, and the reaction you can have is mild to severe. Now, everyone's going to have some degree of a reaction, and by that I mean, no, you're not going to be throwing up, but you could potentially, have a sore arm. Almost everybody who gets a shot in their arm is going to have a little bit of tenderness, a little bit of soreness around their arm, their nice big ass arm like the big ass cigar. And yeah, you're going to have a little bit of, tenderness and soreness. Just like when you get blood drawn. So that's a mild reaction. Now, there are some people, especially with, other types of vaccines like the COVID shot, who do get a reaction. Like, my mother, she got, a nice big ass mom like the big ass cigar, Smoking Essie's mother, me, my mother, she got the coronavirus vaccine, she got Moderna, and she had a pretty bad reaction. She got a fever, she got chills, she got sweats, and she felt pretty sick afterwards. So, and that's a common reaction to the vaccine because that's when your body is building antibodies. So that's a common reaction, but it only lasted a couple days, and, my mom felt, pretty damn sick, pretty fucking sick, but, she definitely made a complete recovery, no lasting effects, and it's better to get the vaccine than actually get the virus itself because, getting coronavirus, especially in my mom's age, she's, in her early 60s, that could be a lot more severe than getting a moderate reaction to the vaccine. Anyway, people react differently. I mean, people will say, like, especially the anti-vaccination people will say, oh, every vaccine is dangerous, it's complete poison, and, everyone's going to have a terrible reaction to the vaccine, blah, 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 blah. That's complete bullshit for the most part, because there are millions and millions and millions of people who get vaccines every year, not just the COVID vaccine, but also other types of vaccines, like, newborn babies, they get their standard shots, their tetanus shot, their polio shot, their smallpox shot, etc., and they don't have a bad reaction. The idea that everyone's going to have a bad reaction to a vaccine, period, that's complete fucking bullshit, But it's very true that someone's going to have a mild reaction. Like, I'm sure a baby would have a sore arm after a vaccine. I mean, that's just common fucking sense, I mean, that shit is common sense. But in terms of, yeah, there will be some people, and I have said this before on my channel, who will have a very bad reaction. There's always going to be a small minority of people, and unfortunately, people tend to blow it out of proportion and tend to, what's the word, make it look like it's a normal when it does happen. So yes, there will always be like, 1 out of 10,000 people who get the shot and will have a terrible reaction and will end up in the hospital, even though it's a very proven shot. It's a shot that's been known to work. It's a vaccine that's very reputable. Yes, there'll be some people who will have a terrible reaction. And guess what? That's just a part of life. I mean, that's just fucking living in the real world. I mean, there are kids who pick up their first peanut butter cracker, a nice big-ass peanut butter cracker like the Big Ass Cigar, and have an anaphylactic reaction and have to be taken to the hospital by the paramedics. I mean, that's just a common part of life. It's, everyone is going to react differently, and yeah, everyone's going to have, there are some people who will have a terrible reaction. I mean, there are kids who get stung by a bee, a nice big ass bee like the Big Ass Cigar, and have no idea they're allergic until they're stung, and lo and behold, they have to be, taken to the hospital, and they might even die from anaphylactic shock because they didn't even know they were allergic to a bee. You don't know until you actually get the vaccine, or you actually get stung by a bee, or you eat your first peanut butter cracker, or your first whatever. So I can't tell you for sure, and I'm not a fucking doctor, I can't tell you for sure that, yeah, you won't have a bad reaction to a vaccine, like the COVID shot, or the polio shot, whatever, but I can tell you this: the vast majority of people who get it are fine. The vast majority of people who get vaccines are perfectly fine, and there will be a small minority who will have a moderate reaction, like some sickness, some, fevers, chills, whatever's, bad reaction, and then there's a very small percentage of people who will have a terrible reaction, a fucking terrible reaction, and that's just part of life. It's just part of taking natural risks in life. Okay, I rambled on long enough. It's almost 7 minutes, so that's just a part of life. Bye, Big Ass Cigar. Pretty fucking cool.